What's happening, y'all? Alright, we're cooking. Hope you're having a satanically, demonically good time down here in hell. In these next 100 lines, we encounter the rise of economic imperialism and political consensus, pivoting from Belial's passive cowardice to Mammon's pragmatic industriousness, before Beelzebub executes Satan's hidden agenda. This section establishes hell not as a place of mere torment, but as a thriving, self-contained empire capable of rivaling heaven through exploitation rather than open warfare. Following Belial, Mammon takes the floor and dismisses both war and submission. He characterizes a return to heaven as an intolerable humiliation, arguing that singing forced hallelujahs to a reigning victor would be a fate worse than hell. Instead, he proposes a philosophy of self-reliance and resource exploitation. Mammon's speech receives an overwhelming, thunderous applause. Milton employs an encyclopedic simile, comparing the roaring approval of the assembly to the sound of hollow rocks blustering after a sea storm, which lulls weary sailors to sleep. This comparison characterizes the assembly as profoundly exhausted and desperate for comfort. They do not want to fight God, but they do not want to beg for mercy either. Mammon offers them a comfortable middle ground, building an empire in the dark. This applause marks the moment the assembly completely rejects the idea of reconciliation with heaven. All right, enough of that. Let's get back into it together. Last time we ended with Belial speaking. Here begins Mammon's response. And after him thus Mammon spake. Either to disenthrone the King of Heaven we war, if war be best, or to regain our own right lost. Him to unthrone we then may hope when everlasting fate shall yield to fickle chance, and chaos judge the strife. The former vain to hope argues as vain the latter, for what place can be for us within heaven's bound, unless heaven's Lord supreme we overpower? Suppose he should relent and publish grace to all on promise made of new subjection. With what eyes could we stand in his presence humble and receive strict laws imposed to celebrate his throne with warbled hymns and to his godhead sing forced hallelujahs? While he lordly sits our envied sovereign, and his altar breathes ambrosial odors and ambrosial flowers, our servile offerings. This must be our task in heaven, this our delight. How wearisome eternity so spent in worship paid to whom we hate. Let us not then pursue by force impossible, by leave obtained unacceptable, though in heaven our state of splendid vassalage, but rather seek our own good from ourselves, and from our own live to ourselves, though in this vast recess, free and to none accountable, preferring hard liberty before the easy yoke of servile pomp. Our greatness will appear then most conspicuous, when great things of small, useful of hurtful, prosperous of adverse, we can create, and in what place soe'er thrive under evil, and work ease out of pain through labor and endurance. This deep world of darkness do we dread? How oft amidst thick clouds and dark doth heaven's all-ruling sire choose to reside? His glory unobscured, and with the majesty of darkness round covers his throne, from whence deep thunders roar mustering their rage, and heaven resembles hell? As he our darkness, cannot we his light imitate when we please? This desert soil wants not her hidden luster, gems and gold, nor want we skill or art, from whence to raise magnificence. And what can heaven show more? Our torments also may in length of time become our elements, these piercing fires as soft as now severe, our temper changed into their temper, which must needs remove the sensible of pain. All things invite to peaceful counsels, and the settled state of order, how in safety best we may compose our present evils, with regard of what we are and were, dismissing quite all thoughts of war. Ye have what I advise. He scarce had finished, when such murmur filled the assembly, as when hollow rocks retain the sound of blustering winds, which all night long had roused the sea, now with hoarse cadence lulls seafaring men o'erwatched, whose bark by chance or pinnace anchors in a craggy bay after the tempest. Such applause was heard as Mammon ended, and his sentence pleased, advising peace. For such another field they dreaded worse than hell. So much the fear of thunder and the sword of Michael wrought still within them, and no less desire to found this nether empire, which might rise by policy and long process of time, in emulation opposite to heaven. Which when Beelzebub perceived, then whom Satan accept, none higher sat. With grave aspect he rose, and in his rising seemed a pillar of state. Deep on his front engraven deliberation sat and public care, and princely counsel in his face yet shone, majestic though in ruin. Sage he stood with Atlantean shoulders fit to bear the weight of mightiest monarchies. His look drew audience and attention still as night or summer's noontide air, while thus he spake. Thrones and imperial powers, offspring of heaven, ethereal virtues, or these titles now must we renounce, and changing style be called princes of hell? For so the popular vote inclines, here to continue, and build up here a growing empire, doubtless, while we dream, and know not that the King of Heaven hath doomed this place our dungeon, not our safe retreat beyond his potent arm, to live exempt from heaven's high jurisdiction, in new league banded against his throne, but to remain in strictest bondage, though thus far removed, under the inevitable curb reserved his captive multitude. For he, be sure, in height or depth, still first and last will reign sole king, and of his kingdom lose no part by our revolt. But over hell extend his empire, and with iron scepter rule us here, as with his golden those in heaven. What sit we then projecting peace and war? Wow. That's all for today. Until next time, ciao.